We've all been there, putting the perfect video game or system on your Christmas list and getting a lump of coal instead. It's the classic switcheroo. Bart Simpson wants Bone Storm, but ends up with Lee Carvalho's putting challenge. It's your old pal Combusty Justy here. And I asked Twitter what their worst video game gifts ever were, and I got a lot of interesting answers. Philip Summers Blue Check says, "We got 2 copies of Fester's Quest the year it came out. That's rough. Not only is the game bad, but you got 2 of them. Hopefully you could return one." I don't think I ever got duplicate gaming gifts as a kid, but I can see why that would happen in an extended family. Nova is tired of your shit, writes, "It was 1998. I spent a year begging anyone who would listen to me for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I got Cyberdeck. Cyberdeck? It's the worst game I've ever played. I actually had to look this one up. Looks like a Cool Borders clone in the style of the Bratz dolls, but there's also monsters, and for some reason it's officially sponsored by Vans, the skate shoe company." Sorry, Nova. No wonder you're tired of people's shit. David Cunningham says, his was Rise of the Robots on CD32. "Saw a ton of billboards and wanted it so bad." I assume he's from the UK since he's talking about the Amiga CD32. I wasn't sure billboards meant the same thing here as in the UK, like chips or lorries. But yeah, apparently they had a huge marketing campaign for Rise of the Robots there that took over huge billboards. Must have been a rough Christmas for a ton of blokes. Here's a really interesting one. Michael Rauschenberg writes, "My grandparents got upsold from a Sega Genesis to a CDI. Oh, hopefully the salesman won some end-of-the-year bonus for that." In hindsight, we all know that the Sega Genesis was a great gaming system, but it was just a gaming system. I can see grandparents being duped by the CDI, it being more of a computer, with the education software, games with live-action footage, faux 3D graphics. So let's just see how much that store ripped off your granny for. The CDI released in December 1991 at $799, or $1,800 with inflation. For the benefit of the doubt, let's just pick 1992, when the price dropped to $599, which is still $1,300. A Genesis with Sonic was $119 then, or $260 with inflation. So, your grandparents were upsold a 438% increase for a system that was 438 times as lame. Aaron Plays Shooting Star writes, "I actually lucked out with the games I was given. The only thing I could think of are the Tiger Electronics, if that counts. Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Person tipping hand emoji." Yeah, the Tiger Electronics looked really cool on the shelf with the packaging and the colorful licensed cartoon characters all over them, but it was a trap. I knew we would get here eventually. A.B. Lipkin writes, "The Power Glove has to be up there, right?" Yeah, it came out in October 1989, so perfect for the biggest Christmas in NES history, I would say. Then, December 15th, 1989, in the middle of the holiday shopping season, the fucking Wizard comes out, and it drives kids crazy. They all want the Power Glove. The kid in the movie was so bad. Even I wanted a Power Glove. Stackmaster-S parentheses Shawan Huandiman says, "All I remember is one Christmas getting the Power Glove, using it for like half an hour and never wanting to use it again." Omega J is also upset with the Power Glove. "If only I knew bad actually meant bad when Lucas sold us on this." Yeah, though, him controlling Rad Racer made me want to get Rad Racer too, which I eventually did. Speaking of Rad Racer, Alfredo Canas writes, "I remember my cousin getting Rad Racer instead of Castlevania 3 for Christmas in 1990. He was so pissed he managed to get his parents to return the game and get Castlevania 3. Not saying Rad Racer is a terrible game, but if you're expecting Castlevania 3, it can be a massive letdown." Well, I do agree that is disappointing. It is the classic tale of wanting a Turbo Man doll and getting his faithful friend, Booster. Good work, Booster. Not the worst thing in the world, but nowhere is good. I would have had to wait for my birthday to get the actual game I wanted if that happened to me. But this kid was able to bully his parents into getting rid of Rad Racer. As I said before, I loved Rad Racer. It had a kicking soundtrack that I don't think people really care enough about. The sounds of the gears shifting, the cars crashing, and the 3D mode when you hit the select button. Though I never had the 3D glasses. All really cool stuff. It's no Castlevania 3, sure, but I cherish this game. Scarlet Sprites says, "Frowny face. and it's a picture of the video art, created by the Brain Trust at LJN. Yeah, that is a tough one. I had a friend who had Mario Paint, and it was really awesome. I think it was about half the price of the LJN video art, too. Well, Scarlett, I'm glad you were able to get over this terrible gift and eventually wind up owning and repairing arcade games. The gift that keeps on giving. Richard says, I got Donkey Kong Land and Batman Forever on Game Boy. 3 guesses which one I enjoyed, and they all do not include Val Kilmer. Well, Rich, I don't need 3 guesses, but I do think Val Kilmer has a place in the DKU. So Rich did get kind of what he wanted, but it turned out to be a dud. Apparently, Batman Forever ruined a lot of Christmases. King of APOC here got Batman Forever for the Genesis and the R-Zone. That's a double whammy. Anything R-Zone related too. And I'm talking about that system, not R-Zone at Toys R Us. That's what they called their gaming section for a while. King of APOC also got a quote-unquote computer from his uncle, but it turned out to be a calculator, and apparently not a TI-83 or Casio calculator, but one with a roll of receipt paper. Like for accounting? A gift any kid would enjoy, right? Big the Max writes, the sports game your grandparents got you even though you never expressed an interest. That's interesting. I remember being pushed into baseball as a kid. Didn't stick, clearly. But I can see extended family assuming you'd like sports. There's a lot of decent sports games out there, but getting a kid Game Day 98 instead of like Nuclear Strike that they wanted is how you start their villain arc. Namely mine, because that's what happened to me. Christmas 1997. Tommy Bourne writes, when you wanted Mortal Kombat, but Grandma bought you this, and it's Extreme G. Yeah, that's the curse of Mortal Kombat for you. A game so cool, so violent that it was almost banned. Plus, the news was running a ton of campaigns to stop adults from buying it. Though that was mostly for the first 2 games. He probably wanted Mortal Kombat Trilogy for the N64, when parents cared less about the whole violence thing. But the N64 had a ton of better racers too, especially the kart racing games. Extreme G came out 4 days before Diddy Kong Racing, let alone Mario Kart. Now, Extreme G is more like a Wipeout, so fine, I guess, but it certainly isn't Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Shana says their mom got them a GameCube with BMXXX for Christmas. She didn't realize it was a porn game. I was 8. You know I used to unlock the all-video cheat mode, Smirk Face. Well, Shay, that's a crime, as the game is rated M for mature, and creating topless BMX riders and unlocking footage of a strip club isn't really for an 8-year-old. However, I am hoping that the game's soundtrack at least stuck with you. De La Soul, Green Day, KRS-One, Motley Crue, Sublime, can't go wrong there. Sean Marafferty, Ukraine Flag, says, fortunately, most of their gaming presents have been very good, but one year they got Bugs Life for Game Boy Color. Awful. Also, Episode 1 Racer on N64 PS1 is incredible. Game Boy Color? Nope. Cry face. I get that. Kids get a lot of licensed games as presents, even today, and they usually aren't that great, especially on handhelds back then. I remember the Pod Racer engines having an ear-piercing whine the entire game. Mega Yo-Yo is upset about Draken on SNES. Now, I'm not very familiar with this game, but I can understand if you wanted a first-party Nintendo game or a fun platformer or something, and getting an RPG like this might upset you. I mean, yeah, it doesn't seem as good as something like Final Fantasy, for sure. Maybe it's the classic case of circling something in an advertisement, but that circle went ignored. Or like the game you wanted was out of stock, so the clerk just like grabbed a random game off the shelf. Steve Z. Gregson writes, any game that wasn't Christmas Nights was a disappointing Christmas game. Now, I get your joke, but I believe this was just a holiday sampler disc, so not sure how widespread it was. And the later versions of the regular Nights game included the Christmas theming, but you had to change your system clock around or unlock whatever. Still, the top Christmas game of all time, in my opinion. Yog Solidus Blueheart writes, E.T. gets an honorable mention. Oh, that's right. E.T. for the 2600 was out for Christmas. His worst game was around Christmas 97 on the Sega Saturn, the incredible Hull, the Pantheon Saga. The controls were god-awful. I get the joke here about God, considering the game has a lot of Greek god influence, but you spelled Hulk wrong. Weasel writes, Last Action Hero on Game Boy was the worst one I ever got. Sucked too because I actually really liked the movie. Same here, as you can see. Yeah, licensed and Game Boy usually ends in disappointment, as we've seen. Joe from BKMTV Studios on YouTube sent me a clip of him getting a 32X for Christmas.
Yeah, this is some special dad picked out. Yes.
You're welcome.
That's a far cry from the N64 kid. But I assume he wasn't too happy with it later on. Sorry, young Joey. I graduated from a NES to a Genesis and eventually to a PlayStation. Thankfully, my parents and I weren't tricked into the Sega add-ons, and my rich friend had the Sega channel, so I was set. Speaking of Sega disappointments, my Retro Life writes, I enjoy Sonic Spinball, but I know many who don't. And this was a title that was rushed out for Christmas '93 in the absence of Sonic 3. I responded that I recall it coming out in February, delayed. Retro Life says, yep, they knew they wouldn't hit the deadline for Christmas, so Sonic Spinball was cooked up. Very flawed, but I always enjoyed it in a masochistic way. Kinky. Daryl Best says, in Christmas of 1999, my aunt got me Superman 64. I knew she meant well, but the game was hot trash. I ended up trading it into EB Games for a loose copy of Kirby into Dreamland, and I was never happier I did. I'm not sure what Kirby is, but I assume you mean Kirby's Dream Land, which was for Game Boy, which was the right choice, though I do wonder how many N64 games were ditched for original Game Boy games. This is a situation where Santa wasn't really sure what you wanted. Same goes for Extended Family, who never really read gaming magazines. Not that they were 100% accurate either, it was always a crapshoot back then. Lastly is Peter. Amazing Larry 2. I like that Pee-wee reference. I've only ever gotten awesome video games 'cause video games are awesome. You know what? I agree with Peter. This Twitter mob I've incited and rallied really ragged on the gifts they've gotten, which is kinda spoiled, insincere, and that's not really the spirit of the holiday. Getting any gift is special, and hopefully came from a place of love, regardless of how critically successful the product was. But if you want to get your special someone or your special self a gift, I got some stuff for you. Now let me put my sales hat on for a minute. Retroware has some new Nintendo Switch games. Aside from Angry Video Game Nerd 1 and 2 Deluxe, we now have Eagle Island Twist and Love 3 fully in stock. Eagle Island is a roguelite action platformer with falconry-inspired combat. It has free bonus DLC that puts a twist on the original gameplay. Love 3 is a precision platformer with minimalistic pixel graphics and tight controls, with one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard, and it contains the first 2 games in it as well. You can head right to the Retroware stores to get those, which is also having big sales around Black Friday and Christmas. Lastly, comment below with your Christmas memories, and those can be bad or, more importantly, good. Thanks, and check you later. If you hate commenting below or buying our games, you could watch another video, maybe about Nintendo Power posters or, whatever.